RIchard Zaldivar, I'm the executive director and founder of the Wall Las Memorias Project, and I came to NCLR in Chicago to participate in an HIV/AIDS panel. There's been a complacency surrounding HIV/AIDS, particularly in all communities, but heavily impacted the Latino population. The perception that HIV/AIDS is over because of the medical breakthroughs and combination therapies, and because the industry, the community, has made HIV/AIDS somewhat glamorous, opening magazines and looking at men who are positive and who are robust. That certainly is true, but not for most of the population. And I think there's a misconception of the toll that HIV/AIDS is still playing in our community. I think it's really important for Latinos, particularly young Latinos, to know that the way to end HIV/AIDS is through activism. We've got to stop the arrogance, the ignorance, surrounding the stigma and the denial. We need to find new ways of talking about sexuality and acceptance and love and compassion. And I think the Latino community could do it a little different than what we have seen in HIV prevention before, because Latinos are loving people. They love familia. That's their whole culture. And I think it's really up to the younger generations to say we need to make a change. Not all programs work for everybody. Not all Debbies at the Centers for Disease Control have a handle in our community. From Mexicano to Central American, to newly arrived immigrant, to gay or bisexual or transgender. We need a movement of young Latinos to make the difference. It's critical for Latinos, whether you're in New Jersey, whether you're in Oklahoma or Yuma, California, or Portland, Oregon, is to have a connection with all of us. And one of the devices, the incredible devices we have, is the internet. We can start. We learned from the Obama campaign that we can have a full-fledged campaign, a community dialogue on the internet. This is where all the young people are at. And it doesn't have to be necessarily about just addressing HIV/AIDS, but it has to include the end to ignorance, action against ignorance, action against bigotry and hatred and homophobia, and a greater discussion of who we are as a community, a greater bonding as a familia, and then a commitment to act until it's over. It took me a long time. It was very painful. I came out at the age of 38 and completely out. I had relationships with men, and I had relationships with women when I was younger. But at my coming out stage at age 38, I came out of the closet when I bottomed out from alcoholism. I was hungry. I needed to be validated. I needed to be accepted. Drinking was one way of doing it. It numbed my insecurities. It numbed my longing to be loved and accepted for who I was. And so when I got sober, I just came out of the closet and came out actually in the LA Times. So a lot of the political folks that I knew in my previous life knew all about me, and they read all about me. So it's a very important, it was a very personal struggle, but it was a great place to arrive. A lot of pain, and I think that whoever we are, however we identify as young, youth, LGBT, we always go through a period of pain. And to know that pain At the end of the day, just like a stormy day in the middle of winter, it's cold and it's rainy, it's cloudy. And sometimes you feel lonely in those cloudy days. Only know that there's sun, and one day after the storm passes by, that there's a sunlight that comes through when the clouds disappear. And the same thing in our personal lives. Knowing that you got to keep the focus, to learn to love yourself unconditionally, to know that God loved you and that you're here for a purpose on earth. Our jobs is to find out what that purpose is. I hear many times people from the LGBT community says, I was a member of that church, or I was a member of that church, and I left that church because of their role on sexuality. And that's okay for whoever who wants to leave an institution. But I got to remind them that there wasn't a gay rights movement in the 1960s, in the 1970s, when I was still in the closet and I was working with the gay community, the Democratic conventions. People were not out, and for the most part, for a lot of that period of time, it was illegal to be gay. Nobody left the country. They stayed within the country, and they learned to utilize the best weapon we can against homophobia and hatred, and that was AIDS. If it hadn't been for all the gay men who died of this disease, we wouldn't have our gay rights that we have today. So we didn't leave the country, nor should we leave any church, because the church is only the institution. The church is only the vehicle to address the inequities of a communication system with God. And so it's important that we don't have to depend on those institutions, but we don't have to leave them either. That we ourselves can teach them the true meaning of love and compassion and acceptance, and teach them that we're all God's children. Especially important for Latinos. For we, as gay men, as gay women, younger people, have that search for God. And it's not until we're really validated by our higher power or a sense of spirit that we truly feel that we're connected. We're in the middle of a park in Chicago. And there's lots of green space, but it's a beautiful space. And at night, people come here and they gather to listen to music. So when you approach the park space, you many times have to find an empty spot. And you often have to look and actually do the footwork to create your own space to sit down and enjoy the music. And it's no different than claiming your own space within the context of your relationship with God. We sometimes don't realize that our education is not just book learned. You can't just go to school to learn what the great minds of the world, the great leaders of the world have taught all of us in history. I say that because I think we need to create our own space. We need to be the examples. We cannot teach our parents to say that God loves us unconditionally. We could reference it. But the greater teacher is ourselves. We could show them. And it's up to them to see us. It's up to them to accept that way of learning about us. And we got to go back to our gods. The history of the sons and daughters of gods. And as often mentioned, as a Christian, I go back to the life of Jesus Christ. It wasn't easy. And he fell down many times carrying the cross. It's no different from what we do in our life. We have many crosses to bear. But among all those crosses, we've got to learn that God loves us unconditionally. And because the more we learn that, the more we accept that we're able to love other people unconditionally. And through example, we teach. I think that's what the movement can do. It's a great challenge. Sometimes it gets lonely out there. But it's the only way to do this. It's the only way to accomplish this.